Ooh. Hello, YouTubers! My name is Willie, and this is your channel, and I'm just the host of it. Today I have for you the Tremere. It's more VTM2 lore. The Tremere and Upstart Clans Rise to Power. This is by Arch Warhammer. Has been requested by Brutality616. So let's check this out. In 3, 2, 1, play. Play. Dum dum. Dum dum. Dum 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 dum.
Clan Tremere.
He didn't say greetings.
A relative newcomer to the world of vampires, one might have expected the
That's
clan
gonna throw it
would
off a
never
little.
have escaped its infancy.
Oh, really?
For the older, more established clans are hardly overly fond of fresh competition. And yet,
Interesting.
in the modern Knights, the clan Tremere is one of the most powerful forces in vampire society. How precisely did a clan that was formed a mere 1,000 years ago rise up to compete with and surpass these vastly older and more powerful clans?
I don't know, that's why I'm watching
Especially
you.
within vampire society, where age directly equals power. And the answer is both simple and infinitely complex at the very same time.
Oh, really?
The clan Tremere's primary advantage over the older vampires was that they had far more of the human in them than their decidedly inhuman superiors.
Oh,
Once the ancient monstrosities of the established clans had grown very comfortable indeed with the status quo and saw no real reason for rash actions or gambles, Clan Tremere was created in a fashion very different from most vampires. A vampire is created by another vampire via a process known as the Embrace. This is the process through which a vampire first drains a human of all blood, and then gives the human corpse a small portion of the vampire's blood, resulting in turning what was once a human corpse into a new fledgling vampire.
nice.
But in the case
And
of the
kinda
Tremere,
gross.
the embrace never took place. Instead, the original
really?
Tremere vampires were turned into undead by a magic ritual. The ritual itself was invented by a man by the name of Goratrix, a student of another powerful mage called Tremere. He was the leader of a so-called house, named after him, therefore becoming House Tremere. The house was a part of something called the Order of Hermes, and specialized in magic pertaining to hierarchies and magical dueling.
Oh,
As for what
nice.
the Order of Hermes was, that is probably a bit too expansive of a subject to dive into here. Suffice to say, it was an order consisting of several smaller houses, who all had their own specializations in the field of magic, all the way from shape-shifting
Nice.
to druidic magic, messaging, and enchantments. The Order of Hermes was, in its own right, a powerful force within the world, and Tremere had even at one point attempted to become the sole leader of the Order, but he was eventually thwarted in that ambition. His next goal was of a somewhat more immediate nature. He had sustained himself over a very long period of time via magic, but his immortality was beginning to wane. And desperate not to lose everything he had worked for over his long centuries, he ordered his disciples to find a potion of immortality. And a means to achieve said immortality was eventually discovered by Goratrix, whom, after having experimented upon the local vampire population of Transylvania, by and large made up from a clan called the Tsimish, had devised a ritual to impart vampirism onto his master and the other disciples. However, he did not tell the disciples or his master that that was what he was going to do. He merely promised them immortality without mentioning the precise nature of said immortality. And you may ask, what difference does it make? His master, Tremere, had only asked for immortality. He had not specified the form it needed to take. Well, you see, being a vampire and being a mage are mutually exclusive with one another. Magic is drawn from a portion of the soul, and as it turns out, becoming a vampire, a undead creature, is quite detrimental to one's soul. And so,
I can believe
when the
that.
ritual was successful, and all 7 disciples along with their master had been turned into immortal vampires, they were less than grateful. In fact, the other 6 disciples wanted to kill Goratrix right then and there, but their master Tremere stopped them. He too must certainly have been a bit disappointed by the fact that he could no longer utilize magic as he knew it, but he must have seen the potential of his new form. He had spent a long
Potential's
time
always
looking
good.
for a way to achieve immortality, but all of the various means had fatal and unacceptable flaws to them, many leading to madness or other even less good things. Whilst the loss of magic certainly was an inconvenience, compared to many of the other flaws, it was a minor one, and besides, it was already done. If he had to accept the form of immortality that had been forced upon him, then he might as well make the best of it. And so Tremere threw himself into his studies, attempting to regain some measure of his lost magical power, or possibly find other powers hidden within his new form to make up for it. And certainly the form of a vampire is not without its very own charms. There was of course a small problem that had to be dealt with as well. The clan Tsimish had become aware of Goratrix's experiments, and they were not at all pleased by his actions. The clan declared war on the newfound clan of Tremere, although calling them a clan as of yet is not necessarily entirely accurate. To begin with, the vampire clan of Tsimish declared war upon the house Tremere, and by and large the rest of the house remained unaware of the new nature of their master and his top disciples. Tremere chose to keep it a secret from them, both out of a certain fear that they might not be overly accepting of his new form, and also because even if they were acceptive, he could not guarantee their loyalty. Before he could bind them to him by the promise of knowledge, of research, and of arcane means that only he had access to. But now that he was no longer able to practice magic, well, the other mages had no real reason to stay loyal to him. He had no further currency to offer them, and so he had to discover a new way to bind them to him. And that new way was discovered some 15 years later. Undoubtedly, Tremere's research had been inconvenienced to a lesser or greater degree by the ongoing war of the vampire clan Tsimish, one the mages were not necessarily all that well equipped to fight. But during the Dark Ages, the mages still had a considerable degree of power, and could also, to a certain degree, rely upon aid from the rest of the Order of Hermes, although that order as well started to become a bit suspicious about the actions of House Tremere. An investigation into said actions were, however, avoided, and so in 1037, Tremere gathered his 7 disciples and forced the so-called blood bond upon them. This was not a creation of Tremere's own mind, but instead a ritual with supernatural power, long practiced and known of by the rest of the kindred. A blood bond is formed when one vampire drinks the blood of another, and this action will eventually result in a slave and master relationship between the two, where the one doing the drinking will become ever more enthralled to the master. At one sip, he will develop strong emotions for the one offering. They could be a wide variety of emotions, mind you, love, hatred, jealousy, but strong emotions nevertheless. At 2 drinks, the drinker will view the master in a highly positive light and find it very difficult to disagree with him. And
Huh.
at 3 sips, the drinker becomes the de facto slave of the master. This kind of bond was practiced frequently during much of vampire history, and was, for a very long period indeed, considered to be a near unbreakable bond. It was only during the Anarch Revolt of the 15th century that this theory was well and truly shattered. The blood bond developed by the Tremere, however, differed somewhat once again from this bond. A regular blood bond eventually begins to lose its potency if the slave does not drink the master's blood relatively frequently. The slave will find it very difficult to not drink the master's blood, and so it's not a difficult thing to reapply if you wish. But the new clan Tremere had an interesting relationship with this blood bond. Whether or not it came about as a flaw within the clan, or whether or not it was as a consequence of some sort of meddling by Tremere himself, is unknown. But the blood bond is far more effective on members of Clan Tremere. And upon their entry into the clan, every new member is put through a ceremony called the Transubstantiation of the Seven, in which the new member drinks a chalice of blood, the vita of the council, the 7 disciples, and of course his original sire. This will guarantee the new initiate complete and utter loyalty to the clan, to the council, and his sire, and is followed up by a period of indoctrination into the code of Tremere. This pretty much guarantees the full and unwavering loyalty of every member of the clan, and since the blood bond is far more effective towards members of Clan Tremere, this 1 sip of blood counts for all due purposes as 2. It does not fully enslave the new member to the clan or his sire, but it is close enough for government work. And after forcing this
Sounds
blood
like
bond
government
upon
work.
his disciples, Tremere's position had been fully secured, and he ordered his disciples to start spreading across the rest of the house. Previously, their existence had been a secret to House Tremere, but now the disciples would begin slowly converting the rest of the mages into vampires themselves, converting the house into a clan. Those who were foolish enough to resist were either killed or sent to the front line of the Omen War, their continuous conflict that had been going on and off for quite a while now with the Tsimish. And speaking of the Omen War, it was a bit of an unfortunate conflict, because Clan Tremere was a very young clan, and was yet to fully understand, explore, and master their new powers. As such, the older Clan Tsimish was inflicting heavy casualties upon them.
Naturally.
Fortunately, the ingenuity and ambition of Clan Tremere saved them from extermination. They were able to develop several rather effective weapons against their enemies, including the so-called gargoyles. Another result of Garatrix's experiments, the gargoyles were a cross between Nosferatu and gangrel vampires. He bred several specialized warrior forms which could be deployed against the Tsimish. The gargoyles were essentially a new vampire bloodline, all of their very own, but bound almost completely to the wishes of their Tremere masters, and were used primarily as cannon fodder and shock troops, albeit effective cannon fodder and shock troops. The creation of the gargoyles would eventually come back to bite the Tremere, as so many of their inventions, but that was still quite a distance off into the future. And besides, Clan Tremere's immediate problem was dealing with the Simish and not getting wiped out in turn. And so, with the Omen War dealt with, at least for now, Tremere set his sights on vampire society. Considered outsiders and interlopers, Clan Tremere were not afforded a great deal of respect within vampire society.
Well, not starting
Something
out.
Tremere was not overly fond of, and so he began researching how he could gain further power. And it was during the course of this research that he came across the concept of diablerie. This is the process through which one vampire can absorb the power and indeed the very soul of another. If it is done upon a vampire of an older generation, then it can allow the vampire feeding to increase his power by lowering his generation. Within vampire society, one's generation is a direct measure of one's power, and so a fourth generation is more powerful than the fifth, a third more powerful than the fourth, and so on.
Yeah.
Incidentally, Tremere himself was considered a fourth generation vampire, and through some means his disciples were considered fifth generation vampires. How precisely this occurred when they all carried out the same ritual, nobody truly knows, but the fact nevertheless remained. And since Tremere was also a very young vampire, his youth combined with his relatively low generation put him near the bottom rungs of vampire upper society, and by and large the clan as a whole was looked down upon and often discriminated against by the more established clans,
Makes
often
sense,
barring
makes
them
sense.
from entry into cities or other hubs of trade or commerce. This situation was clearly not acceptable to Tremere, and diablerie seemed to provide the perfect solution. It was, however, easier said than done. Tremere was a young vampire, and a fourth generation one, which meant that the only way he could really raise his rank, so to say, was to diablerize a third generation vampire, and those monsters tended to be thousands upon thousands years old. Extraordinarily powerful beings, usually with whole clans of their very own. Not the kind of thing that Tremere or his fledgling clan were really in any position to fight.
Yeah.
But there appeared to be a possibility. There was one clan, the Salubri, whose antediluvian founder was currently lying in torpor, a form of coma where the vampire is essentially helpless. If the Tremere were able to attack and defeat this clan quickly, then, well, as they say, the victors write the history books, and they could change the facts to fit their own narrative. It was a bit of a gamble, but it was too tempting of one to not attempt it. And so Clan Tremere assaulted the Salubri and defeated them, gaining access to their antediluvian lord Saulut, who lay in torpor. Tremere himself diablerized Saulut and absorbed his spirit into his own, becoming a third generation vampire and a hell of a lot more powerful, all in one fell swoop. It appeared that Clan Tremere had pulled off quite the coup. Their sire had been able to diablerize the sire of the Salubri, taking on his power, and the Salubri clan themselves were scattered and defeated. The Tremere quickly began to hunt down the remainder of the clan, whilst filling vampire society with propaganda, claiming that it was Clan Salubri that acted first, and that they were devil worshippers and miscreants of the vilest sort,
Ah,
more than justifying their own act of aggression against them.
right.
And the other clans were more than ready to accept this sort of propaganda, even joining in on the slaughter, because from their perspective, this upstart clan Tremere was no real threat. They could be discriminated against at will, and even if he was now a third generation, the clan's sire was hardly a real threat to the other established clans. But the opportunity to wipe out an ancient and established rival like the Salubri, and especially now with their sire out of the game, ooh, that was simply far too tempting of a prospect to pass up. This action granted Clan Tremere a great deal of prestige within vampire society,
Wow.
and due to continued diplomatic and lobbying efforts on behalf of one of the clan's founding members, Merlinda of Wessex, the Clan Tremere was finally accepted properly into vampire society. The fact that the clan's remaining mages also offered valuable services to the princes of Europe was not exactly a downside either, and Clan Tremere finally joined the ranks of the low clans. Despite this, however, the war against the Salubri was not an unconditional success. The Salubri as a clan were defeated, and their sire had been diabolized, yes, but during the process of diabolization, Tremere realized that maybe, just maybe, he had bitten over a bit more than he could chew. Salute was something along the lines of 9,000 years old, and an unbelievably powerful vampire with the power of foresight.
Oh.
The kind of creature that undoubtedly would have seen Tremere coming. And now Tremere found himself locked in a battle of wills against Salute's soul.
Ha!
A battle of wills that Tremere was not entirely convinced he could win.
Oh.
The mental battle essentially resulted in the two personalities of Tremere and Salute becoming entwined in the same body, and the vampire that was both Salute and Tremere entered into a state of torpor. His body was brought back to the chantries of the clan and hidden away. He would on occasion wake up to guide his clan, but, well, the clan could never be entirely sure who was waking up. And to begin with,
Makes
they were not
sense.
even aware of the possibility that it could be Salute offering them guidance instead of Tremere. This led to some rather big mishaps and problems during the later Dark Ages, especially the 1500s during the Anarch Revolt and the Gargoyles breaking away from House Tremere in a bloody uprising.
Nice.
Tremere's new state also made it impossible for the house to conceal its true nature any further from the Order of Hermes, who, upon discovering the new vampiric nature of the house, immediately declared a war of extermination upon it, leading to a wizard's war. This conflict that became known as the Massas War never officially ended, but neither side had the resources to truly annihilate the other, and so it technically continues all the way up until the current day.
Wow.
And the bad news did not end
Wow.
there either. Goratrix had been dispatched on a mission to France to carry out a bit of delicate diplomacy by Tremere himself, or at least so the clan thought. Goratrix proved unsuitable to the task at hand and made quite the mess of things, until he was summoned back home to face the wrath of Tremere. Tremere himself
Nice.
realized that he had made a mistake by dispatching Goratrix, a mistake he could not quite understand either, as if he had been manipulated by someone or something. But he was the supreme leader of the clan, and he could not be seen to be making mistakes, now could he? Especially not mistakes of a nature that he himself could not even explain. And so Tremere denounced and exiled Goratrix from the clan in its entirety.
Wow.
Goratrix would go on to form his own little subset of Tremere called Tremere Anti-Tribu, and would lend his not inconsiderable talents to the Anarch revolt during the 1500s. However, all was not purely bad news for the Tremere. Their new position as a lower clan granted them a certain degree of legitimacy and allowed them to enter into an alliance with the Venture of Hungary against the Tsimish. The entry of the Venture into the Omen War did much to solidify Tremere's position in Transylvania and warded off some of the worst dangers that the other clans could pose. And then the 1500s rolled around. The Anarch Revolt led to a complete rework of vampire society. The revolt of the gargoyles against their Tremere masters was a bloody one indeed, but at the end of the 15th century, the Tremere had increased in power rather than decreased. The Tremere Anti-Tribu, which had joined up with the Anarchs, caused no end of problems for the elders. And the solution to that problem were the Tremere themselves, who offered their services up to the ruling class of the time and aided in fighting the Anarch Revolution. This cooperation and their important part within the elders' plans eventually led to their prominent position within the Camarilla. The Camarilla is another thing that's probably a bit too large to cover now, but suffice to say, it was the new ruling order of all vampires. And the Anarch Revolt eventually ended with the Convention of Thorns, in which three groups, the Camarilla, the Anarchs, and the Assamite clan, all agreed to end hostilities. And most would agree that the clear losers of the Convention of Thorns were the Assamites and the Anarchs, but the Assamites in particular. The entire Assamite clan had to submit not only to reparations and various measures of justice, but they were also placed under a curse by the Tremere, further enhancing the Tremere's position within the new power structure.
Nice.
The ensuing Renaissance was a golden age for the Tremere. With their new and exalted position within the Camarilla, the Tremere had gone from an upstart outsider clan to an important and valued part of the ruling class, and the Renaissance would see their power grow yet further. However, dark clouds were beginning to form on the horizon. Clan Tremere had seen incredible growth and a rapid rise in their stature through their ambition and strictly organized internal hierarchy. Clan Tremere had, when most important, been able to organize and act as a single entity to push and make their own fortunes. But their actions had consequences, and those chickens were about to come home to roost. In 1998, Tremere finally lost the battle to Saulut, who took control of Tremere's body, broke open the wards around him, and simply wandered out of the Tremere chantry, killing anyone who tried to stop him. Tremere, on the other hand, was not entirely defeated. Many had wondered why, after the Convention of Thorns, Tremere had not ordered the complete destruction of the Tremere Anti-Tribu and their rebellious leader, Goratrix. The reason was now made apparent, as Tremere used the blood bond he had forced upon Goratrix to enter into his body, and force Goratrix's soul out of his body and into a nearby mirror, after which Tremere, now in full control of Goratrix's body and powers, shattered the mirror, killing Goratrix and ending the Tremere Anti-Tribu. That success, however, was not enough to make up for the loss of power, that the defeat to Salt had inflicted upon Tremere. Suddenly, the new form of magic, pioneered in many cases by the Tremere thaumaturgy, began to fail them and become ever more difficult. And the research to repair these failings was not forthcoming from the top of the hierarchy. Something was going very, very wrong indeed, and many of the elder members of the Tremere began drawing worrying parallels to their ancient past. The Tremere had transitioned into vampires in the first place because their old magic had started to lose its potency and could no longer keep them immortal. And now they were beginning to see the very same failings in their blood magic.
Oh.
And some began to wonder if this could be the beginning of the end for the Tremere. For whilst the waning powers of their magic was worrying, it in and of itself was not an apocalyptic ending. The Tremere's research had found new paths and new sources of power before. They could do so again. The problem was, however, that over their 1,000-year rise to power, the Tremere had pushed many limits, broken many boundaries, and committed many a gamble. These actions had earned them more than their fair share of enemies, and if it truly was to be the case that blood magic was becoming more temperamental and less powerful, then many of those enemies might see a convenient opportunity for a spot of vengeance.
Yes.
The Tremere's
vengeance is
drive, ambition,
not very
and
good.
scrupulous nature had brought them to the very heights of power. But now that they finally occupied that very same zenith that they had chased for so long, the ground was starting to crumble beneath their very feet. The Tremere had flown a bit too close to the sun, and the glue on their wings was beginning to unravel. And the final nights will not be kind to the Tremere. And so I'll wrap it up there. And I'll do the little talk at the end, which I think I'll do as a bit of a staple of this series, quote-unquote. Whether or not it'll be a real series yet, I don't know, but, well, it's 2 episodes now, so series, quote-unquote.
2 episodes ain't bad.
But the
There's
Tremere,
more to come. I know that.
probably, honestly, one of my least favorite clans, and that's kind of a bummer, because I like the idea of their story a lot. The whole, a bit of a human clan, a bit of a fresh clan, really pushing it. Their ambition is what drives them forward in vampire society and so on. That's cool. I like the idea of that quite a lot, but the Tremere kind of do it in a bit of a ham-fisted fashion. Their rise to power and their fall to power are all a little bit too quick, if I can put it like that. I mean, the primary reason why they fall from power is that their magic kind of stops working and they become less powerful. Whether or not that is a result of the attempt to labradorize, yes, let's call it that. The attempt to labradorize that other dude and eventually failing it. Maybe that was what caused them to lose their power, in which case you'd go like, yeah, that was an element of them being overly ambitious. Because it was overly ambitious. Here's a, antediluvian 9,000-year-old guy, and you're going to take him over with a Tremere who's 3rd generation and, 100 years, 200 tops? Yeah, that was probably
Not
never really going to work out. But at the same time, the Tremere had no real way of knowing that. You got to remember, at this point, they had barely started their interactions with vampire society. I mean, they'd basically just learned about the process of taking over a vampire's power super recently, So, I don't know, their story should be of a gradual collapse of all of their various gambles, all of their various efforts, finally coming back to bite them, All of their various plans, gambles, the enemies made, and so on, all just crumbling down like the The falling of dominoes is what it should have been, and yet it feels a little bit too Deus Ex Machina-ish, a little bit too sudden, you know? But maybe that's just me. As for reasons to play a Tremere, well, they're mages. Why wouldn't you want to play a mage? Mages are awesome. You're basically a walking miniature nuclear weapon. Now, of course, this is a video game we're talking about here, though, in the case of, Borderlands 2, which does make it a little bit less interesting, because video games are, by necessity of their design, going to be far more limited in what you can actually do. And, there has to be rules and regulations in the video games because, well, it has to. Somebody has to program this shit, And so you can't do the truly crazy and, innovative, creative shit that you could do in a tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
Which leaves the mages in these games often being kind of little more than damage dealers with a different way of doing damage, Instead of shooting someone, they cast lightning bolt, which is a little bit more boring than what it perhaps should be. I don't know. On the other hand, they could be adding in some rituals. That would be really interesting. Some really, really powerful and interesting magical effects that is based on you carrying out a ritual. Something that requires a great deal of preparation, a great deal of resources, and maybe even some very special circumstances. That could be interesting.
Very
certainly.
interesting, potentially.
But I do hope they do something a little bit more fresh with the caster formula, because I do feel that it can get a tad bit boring just simply due to the inevitable limitations of a video game, really. On the upside, though, you can play an absolute bastard as the Tremere, siring some little bastards all of your very own, and mind-fucking them into being your eternal servants. There certainly is a degree of charm.
Just a little.
There.
Just a little.
Anywho, until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, have a good day.
Okay, so that was the Tremere, and upstart clans rise to power lore by Arch Warhammer. If you want to go check out his stuff, he's got 40K and all sorts of gaming stuff. Go check it out. There's a link in the description to help you find him. And this was requested by Brutality616. Thank you for requesting that. What I learned. Okay, the Tremere are apparently a young group. And they grew very fast. And were part of a group of mages that lost their magic over time. And so wanted to become immortal. Became immortal through vampirism. And made some potentially bad choices over the years. And now it's coming back to bite them in the butt, it sounds like. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And that was about it. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna leave it at that. Willie, out.
If you like the video, stay tuned for more content. And as always, feel free to comment. Have a good one.